Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Friday, everybody. Today we're going to take a look at Mercury turning retrograde in the sign of Leo. I'm going to do horoscopes for all 12 signs. I'm going to pair them with some sacred images from meditation, which is something fun I've been adding in lately to my horoscopes. I hope that you will enjoy this, and it will help you as you're tracking this Mercury retrograde. If you missed it yesterday, I did a 5 things to watch for list. You could go back and check that out. I also gave you some parallel timelines to track in terms of previous Mercury retrogrades in the sign of Leo. So a lot of good content yesterday as well. If you missed that, you may want to pair that with today's horoscopes. Anyway, as always, before we get into it, remember to like and subscribe. It's my goal to see if within a year from now, we can get to 100,000 subscribers on the channel. I think it is probably around 16,000 more that we would need to get in a year. I feel like that's totally doable. So if you watch the channel and you appreciate it, make this your spiritual home for astrology. Subscribe and don't miss anything that we're up to. Give us the like every day. It really does help. Transcripts of any of these daily talks can be found on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. I am in a bit of a rush with content this week. Last week, we lost a bunch of content last minute. I'm out of town this week for my birthday, so it's been a little bit of a squeeze. Check out the events page for all of the upcoming webinars. Only promotion that I'll give for the day. Let's turn our attention now to the real-time clock and get right into it. They've been a little shorter and sweeter on the production schedule this week because of catching up with this crazy thing that happened. We had tornadoes. I lost my microphone. I was recording for a week and didn't even know it was malfunctioned. So it was such a fun, like Uranus into Gemini story too, in a way. I should call it an astrology fun kind of story, which is the thing that we all know, where it's like, wow, the astrology didn't miss there, and you're kind of mind blown, but it's also like still an inconvenience. Anyway, all right, here is the real-time clock. Let's get it up. And Mercury today, Friday, July 18th, stationing to turn retrograde. If we take this forward, the retrograde will run into August, and the station direct in August is right around the 11th into the 12th. So we've got about 3 weeks to come of this transit, and over these 3 weeks, the transit will happen while Mercury is in the sign of Leo. So that whole sign house is what we're going to be focused on today. Now, yesterday I gave you 5 things to watch for. I want to remind you of some of those things so that you can also apply those to the topics of the house that we're looking at for your horoscope today. These were changes in storylines when Mercury's retrograde in the sign of the sun. Life ambition, sense of life direction or purpose can be subtly reoriented. Look for that reorientation to happen within the whole sign house we look at today. Questions about voice and visibility, authenticity, and being in touch with the inner pulse of our spirit. Such sun themes, Mercury retrograde in the sign of Leo, can bring some of that up. Look for those things to be taking place within the realm of the house we're looking at today. Questions about leadership, authority, solar figures like fathers or any other kind of central figure of authority can go through some kind of change. Our relationship to these figures, our own carrying of power or authority in the world in certain areas can come up. So watch for that within the whole sign house that we look at today. The thoughts of the heart. What is your, getting into that heart-centered space? What kind of wisdom comes through the heart right now? Look for that within these, the topics of the whole sign house. The mind illuminated. How are you being illuminated from within? Where is that natural process of enlightenment occurring, which is common for Mercury retrogrades to shift our path as our understanding, as our mind shifts. But this in the sign of the sun can be particularly illuminating, where we feel like we're back in touch with the source of our very being. That is the solar power of a Mercury retrograde in the sign of the sun. So those are just some reminders. Now what I want to do is turn our attention to each of the whole sign house positions, give you a brief reminder, and let's take it from there. I have some sacred images that go with this. The sacred images come from me sitting down, looking at the chart, considering the whole sign house position, closing my eyes, dropping into a little meditative space until an image pops up that feels relevant, that feels like an archetypal representation somehow. So that process I've been including in somewhat regularly in horoscopes this year, or here or there, I guess. And I've really been enjoying including them. I think it's kind of fun. Reminds me a little bit of almost like Sabian symbols being included. All right, so for Aries, we start with you. Mercury's retrograding in your 5th house in the sign of Leo. And I saw someone sitting at something like an artist's bench, or it's like a table filled with like all sorts of artistic craft supplies. And they were sitting there like, ooh, what am I going to make and who am I going to make it for? That was the image that came to my mind. The 5th house is a house connected to our creative dharma. That is that sense of creativity that is connected to the very essence of our being. So this Mercury retrograde, I wonder if we're considering the creative direction of our soul. What makes me feel creatively satisfied, happy? What am I making and who is it for? Could be core questions that this Mercury retrograde brings up for Aries folks with Mercury in the 5th. Let's move forward to Taurus on the ascendant. This takes place in your 4th house, the place of home and family, land and property, parents and ancestral karma, roots, interior or the private sphere of life. I saw for Taurus the image while I was meditating of someone looking out over a plot of family land. It was almost like they were standing on their grandpa's land or their grandmother's farm or something like that, just looking out over everything. And I think there's a number of ways you could take this. They were looking out over it, maybe because they're about to sell it, maybe it's about to be lost somehow, or maybe because they've just inherited it, or maybe they're wondering if they have any authentic connection to it at all. So take that image in whatever direction makes sense, right? Because I didn't have a strong feeling about what direction this person was going in with what they were looking at. It was just taking in this vast landscape. I wonder for Tauruses how the landscape of family, home, property, land, and the inner sphere of life is changing. What elements around home, family, and land are transforming? What ancestral karma is there to be healed? So that image of someone looking out over a family property, again, take it as an image, a sacred image, a metaphor. All right, we go forward to Gemini. This Mercury retrograde taking place in your 3rd house. I thought this was a really fascinating image, and frankly, it took me a while to understand the connection to the 3rd house. I saw someone looking at an object. I don't know what the object was. They were just looking at something like in their hands and then deciding, I'm putting this in a giveaway bag, like a bag that's going to go to a thrift store, or a bag that's going to be part of a yard sale, or a bag that's going to be given to a friend or someone in need, or I don't know what. And I thought, well, geez, what does that have to do with the 3rd house? Then I thought about it, and I thought one of the things that is so important about the 3rd house in Indian astrology the 3rd house has to do with our desires and our ambitions, and how those desires and ambitions lead to what we practice, what we learn, what we study, what we cultivate, that we can say is ours, not necessarily in the tangible 2nd house sense, but in the sense of this is something I've built and developed with practice that was rooted in something that I wanted. So looking at something that we have and saying, I no longer want this, or I'm giving it away, or I'm going to use it in this particular way for this particular purpose or service or to help someone else. I wonder for Geminis if this isn't a time, in other words, of evaluating desires and intentions, of evaluating and reconsidering and maybe redirecting your efforts and your actions into what you want to do or have, or what you don't want to do, or what you no longer want to carry, and perhaps finding meaningful ways of sharing skills or abilities or giving them away, or perhaps dropping an interest and picking up something different. So that was a really interesting image, and one that feels fitting for a 3rd house Mercury retrograde that might have something to do with a shifting of desires and interests. All right, so for Cancers, we put Mercury's retrograde in your 2nd house. This was really fascinating. The image that came to my mind in the 2nd house, a place of material acquisition of assets, resources, possessions, money, things like material security, things that we learn or have that help prop us up. That are like assets that were given through our birth somehow. That was associated with this in Indian astrology as well. I've been spending a lot of time with the Indian astrological meanings of the houses. So Mercury retrograde in this house, I thought was fascinating because the image that came to my mind was I saw someone almost like, when someone passes away and then the relatives are left to declutter, organize, sell, parse through their belongings. Maybe there's some things that have been set aside through a will. But I've heard many stories over the years of counseling astrology as a counseling astrologer of people who literally had to purge their uncle's house or their mom's house or something like that. So this was sorting through the belongings of others and coming to conclusions about where things needed to go or where things needed to be placed, maybe what someone wanted to take for themselves or how they were going to share with other people. So there's this consideration around who gets what or where something goes or belongs. And I couldn't help but think for Cancers of the fact that you're in the midst of a moon cycle that started with a strong opposition across the 2nd and 8th between the new moon in Leo and Pluto in Aquarius. So that kind of came to my mind too. But maybe there's questions about allocation of resources or sharing and distributing or what you're prioritizing in terms of material goods, resources, money, objects. Maybe they're not all yours. Maybe it's about how they're shared with other people. Interesting. All right, let's look on to Leo. For Leos, this is in your first house. It was a super easy, obvious image that came to my mind, I think, which was I saw someone looking into a mirror that was like cracked into pieces, but it was still in the frame. Like the pieces hadn't fallen out, right? So it's this like totally cracked up mirror. And they were looking at it and seeing this sort of fractal image of themselves. And I was like, well, that fits perfectly I can understand why my brain, I guess, conjured up that image, right? Mercury retrograde in the first house has so much to do with considering different ideas or images of ourselves. Who am I? What parts of me need or are seeking integration or inclusion, or which parts of me do I need to turn the dimmer switch down on, and what other parts need to be turned up? So it's this kind of consideration of all of the parts that comprise the self, and an appreciation for their beauty, as well as maybe some sense of their fragmentation and need for putting them back together. Although maybe there's some purposefulness in taking things into parts. It's not always a bad thing that things crack. I'm thinking of that art form. I think it's Japanese, where the cracked pieces are molded back together through gold, and it becomes quite beautiful. So something's going on. It's very alchemical. It has to do with identity, orientation, selfhood, maybe even health. For Virgos, the image that came to my mind with Mercury retrograde in your 12th house was I saw someone with a secret, and they were in public. So there was like other people around, and they were had this like kind of sly grin on their face, like I have a secret and nobody knows. I think you could take this in different directions. The 12th house is a place of things that undermine us. It's a place of secretiveness. It's a place of secret enemies. It's also a place of the unconscious. It's a place of things that are hidden from us, as well as potentially things that we hide. A fascinating house. I couldn't help but wonder for Virgos if there are secrets that we're keeping even from ourselves right now. Or I wondered about the potential for secrets that are undermining us, or secrets that we have that are pointing toward unconscious issues that we need to look at. It could also be that there's certain secrets that are bringing us joy. Like sometimes the hidden secretive things that are going on when you have a crush and you're crushing on someone and you're talking to them regularly and you haven't yet told any of your friends, "Ooh, I'm interested in someone." Maybe that's a little bit like a Mercury retrograde in the 12th house, where there's a secretive process taking place, and maybe it's filling you with light. And just because it's not quite conscious, not quite public, nothing's totally been decided or committed to, doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing either. I wonder what's existing in a quieter, more secretive space right now, and whether it's undermining you or whether it's adding something creatively to your life. So I would play with that kind of secret creative pulse, and whether it's a good thing or maybe a more destructive thing could be different from one Virgo to the next. But look into that. And the smile, can't. This was someone that was smiling because of their secret, and I thought that was interesting. All right, for Libras. Mercury retrograde in your 11th house. This one was really interesting, and again, for me, wasn't immediately intuitive. This is the place of groups, allies, friends, benefactors, hopes, wishes, and dreams. In Indian astrology, it's also it's a Kama house, which has to do with the satisfaction and happiness we derive from achieving or attaining our desires. So in that sense, it's a house of wish fulfillment. I saw someone, and again, it took me a second in making that connection before I understood it. I saw someone waking up from a dream going, oh, thank God that wasn't real. Thank God that was just a dream. But I take that as a metaphor. Immediately, I was like, oh, that's a metaphor. That's not, it's, this is a picture of someone maybe waking up in time to change something because they realize they don't want it. Or maybe it's an image of someone saying, I don't want that thing that I thought was my dream any longer. Or I'm coming to realize that something that I thought was really satisfying wasn't really real. You see what I mean? So you can play with that image and turn it in different directions. Mercury's retrograde in this house makes me think Libras may be considering, reconsidering, revising, rethinking what brings happiness, who that happiness comes from, what groups, people, allies, or friends are the good ones, and maybe which ones are not. What dreams and wishes and aspirations are appropriate for this time in life and which are not. Scorpios, we go forward, and Mercury's retrograde takes place in your 10th house. I saw someone coming into the workplace, actually like a group of people all coming into their desks to find that everyone had a memo on their desk. It's like, wow, that's interesting. Remind me almost of, remember in Jerry Maguire where he like writes that memo and puts it on everyone's desk and then he loses his job? At the very beginning of the movie, I believe that's what happens. There's some announcement maybe in the workplace that could be connected with an image like this. Some mandate, some shift of perception, some public announcement, some change to the organization or order of the workplace, a change of authority or how power's being distributed or who's in charge, change of roles, duties, organization, buyouts, a shift of vision, a memo that is about a new dream. This was interesting though, because it was like the messenger leaving a written note on everyone's desk. Fascinating to see that in the workplace for Scorpios. Or more broadly speaking, great, I have a dog hair caught in my mouth. That's not lovely. Maybe it has something to do with the changing social or public dimensions of life as well. All right. Dog hair, puppy. All right, Sagittarius. Okay, here's Sagittarius, Mercury retrograde in the 9th house. I saw someone right after class going straight to a professor's office. Make of that what you will. Maybe they're there to protest. Maybe they are there because they're going to profess their love. Maybe they are there because they have an idea. Maybe they're there because they want to ask a question that they didn't get to ask. This was about urgently seeking out clarification or connection to a teacher or learning or a subject or something to do with maybe, like, even if we think of the going for counsel or advice, this is a Mercury that's seeking out wisdom, teaching, teachers, clarification, shifting of understanding, a debate, a conversation around principles or ideas. 9th house, a process of philosophical clarification, illumination. That's a fun way of looking at it. I like that image. What are you saying? What needs to be said? What are you speaking? What needs to be spoken along the lines of principles, convictions? All right, so for Capricorn, this was a fascinating image, and frankly, another one that I didn't quite get at first. It's taking place, the Mercury retrograde is taking place in your 8th house, a place that I like to talk about as the house of soul contracts, the give and take, the exchange between one soul and another. Death is the ultimate taxation for coming into life. Every relationship, there is an exchange. In relationships where things are not reciprocal, debts get created karmically. This house pertains to those debts and their fulfillment, as well as the reciprocal giving and taking that come through relationships, as well as all other kinds of karmic taxations and reciprocal dynamics. Mercury's retrograde here, the image that came to my mind was of someone being stood up at a restaurant, of an oath or a promise or an intention or a commitment being broken. And then you could imagine this person maybe felt brokenhearted, disappointed, or maybe they had complete clarity. You know what? I didn't have a good feeling about this anyway. That also the feeling that there's a debt that's been created when someone stands someone up, doesn't apologize, doesn't have a good reason, just ghosts someone, that they are somehow they are in your karmic debt. Not that you're necessarily wanting them to be, but it just there's a weird way in which that kind of stuff happens. I think you all know what I'm talking about. So what is this about? Karmic debts being settled, being reconciled, the give and take dynamics of relationships being revisited somehow, karmic exchanges, debts, gifts, blessings, loyalty, bonds, and the breaking of bonds as something that is focus right now for Capricorns, I think. All right, moving on to Aquarius. For Aquarius, this Mercury retrograde takes place in your 7th house, the place of love and relationships and interpersonal dynamics, a comma house related to desire and pleasure and happiness. Mercury retrograde in this house, the image that came up was of someone finding a high school photo album. And in particular, this is too long to write out, they were looking back at their high school sweetheart. There was like all of these images and pictures, like, I don't know what they were, maybe prom but it's just someone looking fondly at their high school love in this photo album that they had like discovered in a box or something. I thought, wow, that's interesting. A love from the past come back. Nostalgia, reflection, looking back on old dynamics in relationships, love and desire, and maybe a simpler time, getting back to the heart of something. Certainly romantic, nostalgic, and maybe also looking clearly at what has been received, what's been lost, where you went off track, how you can get back on, what does the heart have to say about love. These were all important dynamics. I think more broadly speaking, just social joy, happiness, and connection, and what it means to have people that really love you and what it means to really love. That seemed to be at the heart of that image somehow. So for Aquarians, watch for the relationship dynamics. Finally, Pisces, Mercury's retrograde in your 6th house. I saw the image of someone sitting down with a small group of people to tell them a piece of hard news. I don't know what the hard news was, but these were people who would, in the image that I had in mind, these are people who might take the news hard, who might be sad, disappointed, scared, but would be there, would have your back. I'm like, why is this coming up for Mercury retrograde in the 6th house? Well, the 6th house can be a place of illness, sickness, suffering. It can be a place of having to endure or persevere. And Mercury retrograde in Leo to me suggests that heart-centeredness around the challenges you're facing, sharing openly from your heart, asking for help, seeking out those most loyal, beautiful, noble-hearted people in your life to share the load with might be a good piece of advice for Pisceans during this Mercury retrograde. Don't walk it alone. Open your heart, share what you're dealing with, and you'll find help. You'll find companionship. You'll find people who love what a big, beautiful heart you have, to the point where they want to help. They want to be there for you. Now, I don't mean for that to sound like something difficult is going to happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It could also be that maybe it's not so much hard news that's being shared as it is, here's a quest, here's a mission, here's a purpose, here's a magnum opus that I'm taking on, and maybe just telling other people about it. Maybe it's time to share openly something that is going to become an arduous creative process or task or mission that you're about to set out on. Maybe this is also on some level about what your heart is in and what it isn't in. And sometimes maybe telling people some hard news has to do with like, I have to tell people who I am and what is real to me, or what matters most. That's not always easy to convey to people who maybe have expectations, or, sometimes it's hard for people to hear that who we are, what we're doing, or where we're going isn't exactly in line with their expectations or their sense of who we are. You know, this is maybe a moment to be clear with other people about where you're going, even if you're scared that it will provoke some level of conflict. Anyway, I also think about any Mercury retrograde in the 6th house as being a process of revising those things that you're actively really working hard at. And like, how can I do it smarter? How can I do it better? So some things there to take away. I hope that all of this has been useful for you. Pair it with yesterday's video. Go back and do those journaling exercises I recommended. I think that will give you the most to work with. That is it for now. Content will be finally back into our total normal rhythm after a couple of very weird weeks that got thrown off here. So I do appreciate all of your patience, and hope that you have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you again next week. Bye, everyone.